Hi guys, so take it from me, I have had an absolutely torrid time over the past few weeks when it comes to the technical side of YouTube. Literally nothing has gone right for me. I don't want to spend like the first 8 minutes of the video talking about this, but it's been a rough ride and I'm still not completely out of the woods even now, to be honest. But just to get some semblance of normality back to the channel, I thought I would go back to my old setup in the living room and do some mini reviews. I don't think I've done one of these types of videos in a while anyway. So if you don't know what this series is about, it's basically where I review 7 horror films in the time that it would normally take me to review just one. I think we've got a nice variety today, older films, newer films. I'm going to talk about these in the exact order in which I watched them, and as we're going along, we will have a film of the week and also a stinker of the week. But we will start with this one. So first up we have Exposé. This came out in the middle of the 70s. It's got an alternative title of The House on Strawberry Hill or something like that. I can't remember, to be honest. This is about an author who lives in the countryside in Essex, but he's struggling to finish his latest novel. So he decides to hire a typist, and the idea is that she will come and stay with him for a couple of weeks, and he will dictate the novel to her as she's typing it up on the typewriter. Now, I struggle to think that this is a method that most real-life authors would use, but I'll just about buy it. What I won't buy is that the typist who turns up just happens to be as gorgeous as Linda Hayden from Blood on Satan's Claw. And the reason I say that is because it actually is Linda Hayden from Blood on Satan's Claw. But there's something really dodgy about this woman from the minute that she shows up. She goes on a little break at one point, takes a walk in the nearby meadow, kills a couple of guys who pester her, and then she just comes back to the house and acts as if nothing's happened. Her demeanour in this film reminds me of... so there's a film called Island of Terror, a really dodgy horror film from the 70s, and this character in this film reminds me of the blonde from Island of Terror, just in how nonchalant she is about death and bad things going on around her. But we just know that as we get further on through this film, there will be some like fatal attraction shenanigans between the author and this typist. But there's 2 big problems with this film. Firstly, the author character is an insufferable bore. I really didn't like him. And secondly, this is far more of a soft porno film than a horror film. I didn't know that coming into it, but literally it's like sex scene after sex scene, and I was like, Jesus, I didn't actually sign on for this. I mean, if you're into that sort of stuff, great. And there is a big lesbian lovemaking session involving Linda Hayden. So there's some good adult content here, but it's not much of a horror film, you know? And I actually watched this on a Saturday morning on my phone because it's free on YouTube. But I didn't know that it was going to have all this sexual content in it. So I was watching it, like, sat there, and my wife was in the corner of the room doing something. I'd like kids bouncing up and down on the couch nearby. But suddenly it's like sex scene after sex scene, and I'm like trying to keep the phone angled so that nobody can see it. And like everybody, anytime anybody got up to go and get a drink from the kitchen, I was like having to readjust the phone to make sure no one could see it. It was a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. I didn't enjoy the movie anyway. I'm only going to give this 1.5 out of 5, and it is our stinker of the week. And we go straight from the stinker of the week to the film of the week. So we're getting all of the awards out of the way early today. This is a more modern film. It came out maybe 2015, 2016. It stars Emma Roberts. She's probably better known for being the killer in Scream 4. And she's also been in quite a few seasons of American Horror Story. Really good actress. And in this, she's playing a college student from New York, but she's highly introverted. She doesn't find it very easy to meet guys, even though she's gorgeous. And one day, she joins this online game. It's on the dark web. It's watched by like thousands of people from around the world, but it's highly illegal, very hush-hush. But you can earn quite a bit of money for it. So what you've got to do, if you decide to take part, you've got to do dares. You'll be given a dare, and to start off, the first one you do will be really easy. So, for example, you might be asked to throw some tomatoes at a cinema screen and then run out before you get arrested by the police or something. And for doing that, you might get $20 added to your online pot. But then the dares get harder and harder. The money goes up, obviously, but if you get all the way to the finale, you might be asked to do something really dangerous, like hang from some scaffolding, like 2 miles in the air or something. So you can die from these dares because they do get quite dangerous. You are allowed to leave the game at any point you want, but if you do, you'll have to sacrifice the entire money pot that you've been building up. So it's quite a neat concept. I don't think I've seen anything like this in a horror movie before. And it's not just the main character who's playing the game, her best friend is. There are a couple of guys in there as well. There's this one contestant who's an absolute dick. I could not stand him. And yet he gets this one dare where he's got to lie down on a train track and have a train go over the top of him. And I was so nervous watching this that I wanted him to survive, even though I hated the character, because I just did not want to see this guy's face get ripped off by a locomotive. There's a lot of tension in this film, and you don't know what dare's coming next, so it really keeps you on the edge of your seat. If I've got one complaint, it's that the end of the film is a little bit lackluster. It feels like the end of an episode of TV where the whole situation gets sorted and yay, next episode we'll go on a completely different adventure. It doesn't feel like the end of a horror film somehow, but it's a very stylishly shot film. Like there's lots of internet messaging and text messaging and emails in the film. They all sort of pop on the screen in a very cool looking sort of way. I'm going to give this one 3.5 out of 5. I would have given it even more, but for the fact that I didn't really like the ending. But I definitely recommend you watch this one. It's called Nerve. It's got Emma Roberts in it. Landmine Goes Click is a Georgian film from Georgia. And just for the avoidance of any confusion, let me quickly say that I mean Georgia, the country from Eastern Europe, not Georgia, the state of America. Although I do think it would have been quite cool if this film had taken place in Georgia, the state of America. I can just picture like a golfer stepping on a landmine at Augusta or something. But enough of my random horror daydreams. Let's talk about this movie. It involves 3 American tourists traveling through the countrysides of Georgia, the country. 2 guys, 1 woman. But one of the guys steps on a random landmine and they quickly realize that if the guy takes his foot off the landmine, well, you can probably guess. Now, this is a singular location horror film for the most part. Those films can be very hit and miss. But there are multiple threats in this film. It's not just the landmine that is a big danger to everybody. So we find out very early on, for instance, that the woman has been sleeping with both guys. And obviously this is dirty laundry that will have to come out, but it's not the ideal time to do it when one of you is stood on a landmine. And also, there's a weird hippie sort of guy floating around, a Georgian man who's got like an attack dog with him, and this guy is a complete weirdo. So there are multiple threats in this movie. And for 45, 50 minutes, I was riveted by it. There are multiple avenues that this film could have chosen to go down in the final act of the movie, but for me, it just picked the wrong one. I was a little bit unsatisfied with where this movie ultimately went. I'm just going to give it 2 out of 5, and I mainly give it that because it's such an original concept. I just wish it had done something different than what it did, but other people might completely disagree with me. This one's a bit of an oldie. Well, it's an oldie where I come from. So the stuff is basically like The Blob, but with white stuff instead of see-through stuff. Oh, and it's a horror comedy, and I'm not really into comedy films. I don't have much of a sense of humour. I'm a very serious, boring person. Unless a comedy film is either Tremors or Caddyshack, then generally I'm not interested. And I could tell from the very first scene of this movie that it was going to be really silly and not serious at all. And to be honest, I was mentally checked out of this after like 30 or 40 minutes. In fact, before I had this channel, I might have turned off this film like halfway through, but a lot of times these days, if I'm halfway through a horror film and I'm not really enjoying it, I'll often think to myself, well, if I can just stick out the next 40 minutes, I could at least use it for the mini reviews. There is that kind of mentality going on these days, which I guess is a positive thing. It means that I'm finishing more movies, even if they don't start that great for me. But I wasn't into this at all. I'm still going to give it 2 out of 5 because I could easily imagine that it's one of those sort of cult films that, like the old school 80s horror fans really enjoy. But I think it's one of those things that you have to have seen back in the 80s or the 90s to build up some sort of affinity for it. Trying to watch this for the first time in 2025 is rough, in my opinion. So, yeah, just not for me, this one. I much prefer The Blob, which is an excellent film. Next up, we have Gonjiam Haunted Asylum. This has got a reputation as being one of the better found footage films from the past few years, which makes me wonder why I've not seen it until very recently, because I'm a big found footage guy. I can tell you actually why I watched it just in these last few weeks. It's because it became available on Shudder, and I've got a subscription to there. So this is about 6 or 7 people who have their own YouTube show or some kind of online show where they basically go around abandoned places at night time, filming themselves, getting scared by ghosts, whether real or imagined, mostly imagined. I'm trying to think which country this takes place in. It's somewhere in Asia, and you get English subtitles. I can't actually remember which country it is. I don't think it's North Korea, but all those other countries from that sort of area are on the table, but I can't remember which one it is. So obviously the place that they go to in this film is haunted for real, and suddenly they're all trapped in this asylum and they start dying one by one. The story is fairly predictable, but I don't have many criticisms about the movie. It's a very solidly made film. A lot of the scares are very well thought out. The biggest problem with it all is that I just felt like I'd seen it before. There's an American film called Grave Encounters, and Gonjiam Haunted Asylum just feels like a remake of that. In fact, we've already had a remake of Grave Encounters before. It was called Grave Encounters 2. So I definitely didn't need this third film that's basically the same thing. If you haven't already seen Grave Encounters, then I guess you might enjoy Gonjiam Haunted Asylum, but I just had this tired feeling watching this, and I definitely went into sleepwalking mode in the final third of the movie. I'm still going to give this one 3 out of 5 because it is a very good effort. And if you haven't seen Grave Encounters, then this film probably becomes a 4 out of 5. So I'm still going to recommend this one. This is my second recommendation of the video after Nerve. Bloodstar is America's version of Wolf Creek, I guess, but nowhere near as good. So we've got this Latino woman who's driving down the deserty highways of New Mexico, and she comes across this corrupt cop who starts to make her life a misery. And what we get, therefore, is this game of cat and mouse where they're sort of chasing each other up and down the highway. And this goes on for a long time. Every time this woman shakes this cop off, somehow he reappears again from nowhere. So this film also plays a lot like The Hitcher. It's like a cross between Wolf Creek and The Hitcher, actually, but nowhere near as good as either of those films. The biggest problem here is that the film shows its hand way too quickly. Within 5 minutes of this, you know what the setup is. The cop has been established. The main girl has been established. We know what the game is, and off we go. One of the reasons why Wolf Creek is so great, the original film, is that you don't even know what the horror is for like 40 minutes, but you get this deepening sense of doom in the pit of your stomach as the characters get further and further into the outback. But there's none of that here. The film's just so desperate to get into it that there's just hardly any build-up. And honestly, 10 minutes into this film, like, there's so much runtime ahead of us, and a lot of padding goes on. Therefore, there's this whole ludicrous subplot involving a waitress, which leads to one of the longest and most pointless dialogue scenes in a car I've seen in a long, long time. There's a couple of late twists that attempt to just give you something different towards the end, but it's not enough to rescue this film. I'll still give it 2 out of 5 for effort. A lot of these films today are very lucky to not win the Stinker Award, in all honesty, but I can't recommend this one. The only thing I will say is if you've still, for some reason, not seen Wolf Creek or The Hitcher, please watch them, although you probably have. Finally today, we have a bit of science fiction horror with Vivarium. This stars Imogen Poots and Jesse Eisenberg. Now, Poots is the woman who played the lead role in the 2019 version of Black Christmas, which I was unfortunate enough to see at the cinema, and I've kind of felt ever since that Poots owes me a good film. And for a while, I used to think that Jesse Eisenberg owed me a good film, at least until the director's cut of Batman vs. Superman came out. But in this film, Poots and Eisenberg are playing a young couple. They're looking to buy their first house. She's a teacher. He's a gardener at the same school. So instantly I was thinking, buy a house? How can you afford to even rent? But they go to this estate agent anyway, who takes them to this new build estate in the middle of nowhere, seemingly. All these houses are lined up. They all look the same, totally like identikit houses. They call me cynical, but come on, can they not build houses any better looking than this? Because these houses do genuinely feel like the sort of rubbish that they would build nowadays. But the estate agent abandons them quite randomly, and when the young couple tries to leave the estate, they can't, because when they try and drive off the map, they end up coming back onto it from the other side. So something has happened to time and space. They are trapped on this estate, and nobody lives in any of these dozens of houses. So they've got the whole estate to themselves, but they can't go anywhere. And I loved this setup. Like, for a while, I was totally into this movie. I've not seen a story begin like this before. So I was thinking, wow, what's going to happen next? What is this all about? Unfortunately, the film doesn't like to give you much in the way of answers. This is a very minimalist film. It feels very arty. It's afraid to go anywhere, you know, and there's this really annoying child character in it. You will hate this kid who ends up in this film. But I was just ultimately disappointed by the end direction in this film. I'm only going to give it 2.5 out of 5. So, yeah, after a promising beginning, it didn't really go anywhere for me. So I'm going to say that Imogen Poots still owes me a good film. Maybe next time, love, eh? But that is the end of my 7 mini reviews today. I'm not going to do a reading update today because given everything that's happened with the channel recently, I'm not even sure that these clips that I filmed are even going to take, because I've had so many problems with editing and stuff to do with sound that I won't bore you with. But if I get this video out and it goes okay, then maybe for the next video, if I can get back into the swing of things, I'll start reintroducing stuff like the mini book reviews at the end of my videos. Although if you are interested to know, I have finished another couple of books recently, Without Remorse by Tom Clancy, because I'm trying to get into the Jack Ryan books, and also Christine by Stephen King. I've read that as well. I'd give that one probably like 3.5 out of 5. Without Remorse, that was a lot better. I'd give that one maybe 4 out of 5. So I'll leave it there for today. Touch wood that this video did make it out there, and maybe I will catch you all again next time. Bye-bye.